перейдем на следующее выступление. The next presentation will be by Frederic Tремблэй of St. Kliment Ochridsky University in Sofia, Bulgaria, as well as the Baltic Federal University imeni Immanuel Kanta here in Kaliningrad.
So, Solovьев was often characterized as an idealist. For instance, David Backhurst, in his article Idealism in Russia, characterizes Solovьев as a metaphysical idealist. Here he says, idealism that flourished in Russia in the last quarter of the 19th century. He more specifically characterized his idealism as a metaphysical idealism. Andrei Zhvaliki also referred to Solovьев. Valitsky. Okay. Valitsky. As a metaphysical idealism. But these are mischaracterizations. So the origin of this mischaracterization is the Soviet era, right? So Soviet philosophers were building straw men with the religious bourgeois philosophers, calling them idealists, was putting them along with Kant, with the German idealists, with the neo-Kantians. So it was easier this way to fight with them, right? Okay, but in the aftermath of publishing his magister's thesis, The Crisis of Western Philosophy, Konstantin Kavlin published an article, critical review of his book, in which he, so A priornaia Philosophia, in which he criticized Solovьев for adopting the view that we only perceive the phenomenon, that we only have cognitive access to the phenomenon. He criticized Solovьев for claiming that the world is my representation. So this is a thesis that Solovьев took from Schopenhauer, but as Schopenhauer also said, the world is not only my representation. Solovьев, Schopenhauer believed that he actually knew what the thing in itself was, and this is the case also for Solovьев, right? So Solovьев replied to Kavlin in an article on the reality of the external world and foundation of metaphysical knowledge, in which he rebutted Kavlin's accusation. And so he's going to reuse some of these arguments, but he's also going to develop his view in La Sofia, which was first published in French in 1876 when he was in Cairo. And then he's going to present similar views. Is there a pointer here? Yeah. He's going to present similar views in an article entitled The Reality of the Moral Order. And then some of this material is going to be reused in Opravdanie dobra, the justification of the good. So I'm going to look at these texts, provide textual evidence from these texts. So Solovьев, in fact, affirms the existence of the thing in itself, other selves, and so the existence, but also the possibility of knowing the thing in itself, other selves, monads, which he associates with atoms, matter, inorganic beings in general, rocks and minerals, organic beings, plants, animals, human beings, artifacts, real relations, values, moral values, aesthetic values, beauty, and the absolute principle or the divine being. I'm not going to argue in favor of all of these things. Some of these are trivial. Some of these we already agree upon. I'm not going to argue that. I'm not going to present textual evidence for the existence of the absolute principle in Solovyov. That's unneeded. But I'm going to look at the more contentious ones. So in the reality of the external world, Solovyov says, from the fact that the external world as such, that is in relation to me as other, because what is external can obviously be such only in relation to an other, is only my representation, it does not follow that in itself, without relation to me, that is not as something external, it does not have its own reality. In fact, every phenomenon corresponds to a certain real being, independent of the representing subject. And then he makes the following reductio ad absurdum argument. If I, denying the being in itself of the world, declaring that everything on earth and in heaven exists only for me, that is only a state of my consciousness, then I must consistently deny my own being in itself. I have to affirm the following: I myself, my I, is nothing but a state of my consciousness. It is clear, in fact, that if I do not have being in itself, if I am not a being in itself, then I must only have being for an other. But there is no other, because everything that exists is already recognized by me as only a state of my consciousness, and consequently already presupposes me. An object without a subject ceases to be an object. A representation is not a representation when there is no representer. Therefore, we have here an absurdity that destroys itself. So this is the end of the reductio ad absurdum. So I'm not going to evaluate whether these arguments are valid or sound or unsound, but I just want to establish that Solovyov is an ontological realist and an epistemological realist. Oops. In truth, he says, everything can be my representation and everything can be at the same time have being in itself. The phenomenality of the world, for me, does not contradict its beingness in itself. The phenomenon as representation and as a thing in itself, Ding and sich, are not two absolutely separate spheres inaccessible to each other, but only two distinct yet inseparable sides of any being. In La Sophia, he says, so this is the beginning is a dialogue between Sophia and someone called the philosopher, who is apparently Solovyov himself. And here Solovyov says, you promised me to let me know the thing in itself. And Sophia replies, through external phenomena, we know internal phenomena. And through the latter, we know being, what the philosopher called the intelligible character. So whether she's talking about Plato or Kant here has been a subject of debate. Phenomenon, she says, means apparition or manifestation. This presupposes something that appears or manifests itself, and that, considered independently from its manifestation, is evidently the being in itself. Do I really have any knowledge of the essence of the other? Oh, okay, so this is the textual evidence from La Sophia. And then in the reality of the external world, he says, do I really have any knowledge of the essence of the other? Undoubtedly, I have. More precisely, I have knowledge of the essence of other people, because I know that other people, besides their phenomenal side, that is, besides their relation to my cognizing subject, besides their objectivity, have also an inner psychic side. They are essences homogeneous with mine. That is, they all have the essential inner determinations that are revealed to me in my self-consciousness. Therefore, that which is unconditionally inaccessible for someone's external objective knowledge is a pure X. The inner subjective side of the other becomes accessible and known by way of analogy, right, with the content of inner self-consciousness. And this analogy is not an abstract one, but a quite immediate one. I am immediately certain that I know that the person with whom I am speaking is not a manifestation of some Ding an sich unknown to me, but an independent being having the same kind of inner reality as myself. So we know that other selves exist by way of analogy. And in La Sophia, he has a similar reasoning. Sophia says, "Do you know me? Who speaks to you?" The philosopher replies, "When I look into the deep blue of your eyes, when I look into the deep blue of your eyes, when I hear the music of your voice, are these the external phenomena of sight and hearing that I perceive? Good Lord, I know your thoughts and your feelings, and through these I know your being." And this is all, and Sophia replies, and this is all how beings know each other. By external phenomena, we know internal phenomena, and by these we know being. Sorry. And in crisis, so now let's move to the existence of monads or atoms. In crisis, he had already introduced the monads into his worldview. He says the basic elements of everything that exists, simple substances, are monads. A monad is an active force, vis activa, its action being determined as representation and striving. Everything that exists is thus not only animate, but even consists of souls. And in the reality of the external world, 1 year later, he says, our law, and this is the law of analogy by which we know other selves. Our law also extends to the inorganic realm, and on its basis, we must recognize that not only indivisible organic beings have their own inner reality, but also indivisible inorganic beings, that is, atoms. So we must admit that all substances consist of indivisible units or monads having their own inner reality, homogeneous with that which we know directly in our own experience. Now, so atoms, yeah, this is a bit small, sorry. Now, in La Sophia, he's going to say, Satan exerts his force equally in all elements, atoms, and monads. But in all elements, he also undergoes the action of the demiurgos. In order to escape this action, he concentrates his forces, that is, he withdraws his action from a part of the monads to render it stronger in the other part. The monads that Satan dominates, that is, the monads where dominate appetition, gravitation, heaviness, inertia, that exist only in themselves, it is the monads that constitute matter, properly speaking. It is Satan who condensed himself through undergoing the action of the demiurgos. It is Satan materialized. So regardless of whether he really believes in the physical existence of Satan, Satan here symbolizes or incarnates the forces of repulsion, right? Egoism, it is the principle of isolation. So we see here that monads, which from the outside are perceived as atoms constitute matter. Right? So matter is not just souls or spirits. It is constituted of souls and spirits. And there's a difference in that. Because in matter, there are novel categories that don't exist in souls. Right? Matter is extended. It has resistance, impenetrability. And these categories are attributes that are not reducible to the attributes of souls. Right? So even though matter is made of souls, it's not reducible to souls. So, and even though there's a process, so since the fall of man, even though there's a process of the spiritualization of matter, and there's a recent book about this by Oliver Smith from 2011 called The Spiritualization of Matter, and Smith emphasizes this process of the spiritualization of matter. But there is the other side of the coin, the materialization of spirits or of the spirit. And in order to be a spiritualization of matter, there needs to be matter. Now, in the reality of the moral order, so 10 years after the reality of the external world, he claims that there are different stages of being, or realms of being, or we could call them levels of being. There are 5 of them, he says. The mineral, or more generally the inorganic realm, the vegetal realm, the animal realm, the human realm, the divine realm. Minerals, plants, animals, and natural humanity and spiritual humanity, such are the typical forms of being from the point of view of the ascending process of universal perfection. Now, so these are the 5 realms of being, according to Solovьев. Now, he says there are different points of view, because you can take these 5 realms and you can cut the cheese in different ways, so to say, or cut the cake in different ways. Right? He says, from other points of view, the number of these forms and stages might be increased, or, on the contrary, be reduced to 4, 3, or 2. Plants and animals may be grouped together into one organic world, or the whole realm of physical being, both organic and inorganic, may be united under one concept, that of nature. In that case, there would only be a threefold division, the divine, the human, and the natural realms. Or finally, one could stop at the simple opposition between the divine realm and the realm of this world. So we can have the vegetal and animal realm composing together the organic realm, although it sort of begs the question whether the human realm belongs to the organic realm, or all of the lower realms can be put together into the physical realm or nature, or we can divide between the divine realm and the realm of this world. Now, all of the entities in these realms have existence. And in this, Solovьев goes further than a lot of the ontological realists. We'll come back to this, but just a textual evidence here. A stone exists, a plant exists and lives, an animal exists, and in addition is conscious of its life and its actual states. A human being perceives the meaning of life with the help of ideas. The sons of God carry this meaning or perfect moral order into life in everything. Oops. Now, So this one is a contentious issue. The thesis that human beings or animals exist is not contentious, but that stones exist has been contentious in the history of philosophy. Even Aristotle, right, who epitomizes the realist philosophers, who rejected the substantiality of stones, because stones don't have a principle of unity in the way that living beings do. Right? So for the Aristotelian tradition, stones don't have substantiality. But Solovьев says that a stone exists. It is clear from the perceptible action that it has on us. Whoever denies this truth, he can easily, as many have done, be convinced of it by hitting the stone on his head. A stone is a typical embodiment of the category of being as such. A stone is what it is, and it has always served as a symbol of unchanging being. Now, so do you think this is a naive argument? No? Who thinks this is a rather naive argument? Yes? Only one? Really? Actually, in a footnote here, Solovьев says that this is maybe too naive for a philosophical argument. And it is formulated naively. But this is actually an example of the argument from causal efficiency. So there's this criterion, and this comes from, it's also called the Eleatic principle, because it comes from Plato's Sophists, in which Plato, or the Eleatic stranger, proposes the following criterion of existence. Any kind of entity whatsoever that has causal efficiency on something else necessarily exists, has reality, right? Even if it's only to a minimum degree. So if we accept the criterion from causal efficiency, and if we agree that stones do give concussions to people when they hit heads, then it follows necessarily that stones have causal efficiency and therefore that they exist. Right? And so if we agree with that criterion, who agrees with that criterion? Do you? No?
Depends on what you call existence and reality.
Well, to have causal efficiency.
Yeah, well.
If something has causal efficiency, therefore it exists. Well then, anyway, so if you agree with that criterion...
You're trying to persuade us now. So you think that
I'm
can have causal impact.
Okay, you're right. I shouldn't try to convince you. And this is also an example of the argument from resistance that Maine de Biran used, and that was reused later by Max Scheler and Nikolai Hartmann. I know someone's going to talk about Max Scheler. So the argument from resistance is used by Scheler and Hartmann in the realm of emotional acts. So the idea is that when you encounter resistance to your desires or your will, etc., then this shows that there's an external world, that there's a thing in itself beyond the phenomenon that resists your will or your desire. But the argument, the form of the argument applies also to physical beings. If we didn't encounter resistance, we could walk through walls, we could survive car crashes. So this shows that so that there's a thing in itself beyond the phenomenon that resists our own volition. Now, he also argues in favor of the existence of real relations, which he associates with the logos. So relations and the logos are the same thing for Solovyov. He says in The Reality of the External World, he says, in external or objective cognition, that is, in cognition proceeding from the data of external senses, we know only real relations of real beings, that is, their external interactions. And there are many kinds of relations that Solovyov talks about in his works. And for instance, the interrelations between the stages of being. So the mineral level conditions the level, the vegetal level, the level of vegetal being, and so on. So the lower levels condition the higher ones, and the higher ones depend on the lower ones. There's also intermonadic relations. So like the other Russian neo-Leibnizians, like most of them, he rejected Leibniz's thesis that monads have neither doors nor windows, right? So for him, there's a causation between monads. Yes?
5 minutes, please.
Okay, I'm almost there. Etc. He also admitted the existence of artifacts. I quote, I attribute intrinsic independent existence not only to other people, but also to trees, tables, chairs. This table that I see and touch it has in itself the relative qualities of my representation and only of my representation, but it does not follow from this that my representation does not correspond to something intrinsic, to a reality independent of me, immediately unknown to me. On the contrary, the above-mentioned reason compels us to recognize that every phenomenon corresponds to a certain real being, independent of the representing subject. So he admits of the existence of artifacts when it's actually contentious in the history of philosophy whether artifacts exist. So even in ancient Greek philosophy, so you have the argument from the ship of Theseus, right? So here's a synthetic picture of the kinds of beings that Solovyov admits in his philosophical system. So therefore, Solovyov is not a metaphysical idealist. Solovyov is a representative of Russian ontologism, and that's my conclusion.
Спасибо, Edward.
Frederick, would you go back to slide existence of other selves? Okay.
I had a couple.
It's the one.
Do you remember a keyword?
Yeah, certainty. Certainty. I am immediately certain I know that the person with whom I'm speaking. I find it curious. No, go back to that one, please. No, stop. Back.
Back?
Certainty. You have the thing, analogy and certainty. It's not in that one. Either before or after. I don't. Yeah. Okay. Put that thing down. Yeah. I find the argument curious. I don't know if you know Husserl's fifth meditation in the Cartesian meditations. It's precisely the same issue. How do we know the other? He says by analogy. But of course Husserl says that analogy is not immediate certainty. Whereas here, He's confused the issue systematically. He says, if the other is given to me with immediate certainty, I know that the other is there. Therefore, we can conclude, I don't need the analogy. So you have a choice here. If it's analogy, then you have a problem because you know you don't have immediate certainty. If it's not analogy, then in effect, I look at you and I know just in the immediate fact of my intuiting your presence as a human, that you and I share something identical, something essential. That's the first thing. I don't know if that's a question or a remark or just a problem I have with Solovyov. The second bit, I've got this one here. The second bit has to do with the beginning, idealism, materialism, whatever it be. I think we can restate the thing this way. You have used expressions like ontological realism, and at the end just now you spoke of Russian ontologism. I find that all extremely confusing, you know, because, for example, an ontological realist could well be a metaphysical idealist and a metaphysical realist. And in the case of Solovyov, I would say what we want is to say,
yeah.
well, realism, I mean, there are people who say, like Hegel, that the whole world is ideal stuff of some kind, it's spirit, it's Geist. So, in fact, we say he's an idealist, but we mean by that metaphysically. Whereas, of course, Hegel is an epistemological realist. He says the table is right there, there's no problem, it has to do with me. But of course, my mind is part of some bigger thing, which is called his metaphysics, right? I would suggest this, as far as Solovyov is concerned. He's in effect an ontological monist, or a metaphysical monist. His reality is a God-created reality. But at the same time, he's a categorical pluralist. There are many different kinds of things. Material things, ideal things, all those levels of strata, whatever you want to call them, what you find by Hartmann, Scheler, Ingard, and all the rest. Of course, they're different categories, but of one reality, the nature of which, in Solovyov's case, is ideal, shall we say, because it depends on God, as opposed to the nature of the world according to Soviet philosophy, which in many ways is entirely comparable with that view, but it says that the nature of all things is matter. Now, what the hell matter is another thing, but can you live with that?
So, but about analogy and certainty, yeah, I don't know, it looks like an inconsistency.
It looks like a redundancy, put it that way. You know? He doesn't need one, you have to choose.
Well, inconsistent. But, no, maybe you could say that analogy is, yeah, I don't know. But I know that Lusky is going to argue against the argument from analogy, or the analogical view of, and so maybe he's refining, maybe he's criticizing and refining Solovyov here, because Lusky is going to choose the path of immediate certainty.
Yeah.
And, but about the idealism, realism thing. Solovyov himself says that he's a monist and a pluralist and an idealist and a realist and a...
I know. My reaction came from the fact that you said that people have accused him of idealism. And then you cite the Soviets in your favor, so to speak, negatively. Well, he is an idealist. But we have to understand what that means. Metaphysical idealism.
Define your term.
Metaphysical idealism. The substance,
define
the nature of the real.
Idealism. Please define metaphysical idealism.
As I tried to put it this way, a God-created world. So there's a dependency relationship. The world depends on something external to it. The nature of which, given that it's external to it, is ideal. And given the effect of the creative act, it obviously shares the same substance with the creative act, hence it's ideal.
Thank you very much for your presentation, but I think we need to problematize this problem, because you took some set of expressions by Solovyov, which proves that he adapted the reality of the external world, but we can find in Solovyov, especially in his letters, another set of expressions. For example, I don't remember whom he wrote, but he wrote something like that, that he was asked, did he believe in Supreme Being? And he said that he believed only in Supreme Being, and he doesn't believe in reality of difference, the different things, and this external world seems to him unreal. It's his very famous expression. And I think we should ask some questions. The first of all, is the word reality, concept of reality, has value? Is it a value for Solovyov? Does he have a just a ценностный aspect of reality? And another two questions: is the death real? The problem of death and problem of time, is the time real for Solovyov? And I don't think we can answer this question directly, that he thought that death is real and that the time was real too. Because for him, I think there were two different types of reality. And the reality of God and reality of Supreme Being, reality of all unity, is much more reality than the reality of table, of chair and stones. And I think by this reason we cannot say about Solovyov as realist in your sense, but because for him reality is not just only a thing that something exists. Reality is just it's a dialectic of reality, because table is less real than God, for example. And I don't think it's a realist evaluation, a realist position. It's a position of metaphysical idealist, as I understand.
What does it mean for something to be more or less real?
Yes, I think
can reality be quantitative?
not quantitative, but it's a problem of quality. It's
Yeah,
not
so you
less
cannot
real
say that tables have less reality than God. They just have a different kind of existence.
It's not different kind of existence, but the different stepping, different degree of reality. And I think it's we need to make this correction. Different degree of reality.
Yeah, but the degree is
And that's why table is real and God is real, but not in the same time, not in the same sense, and not in the same degree. And I think it's a special idealistic position, idealistic approach to reality.
I gave you textual evidence. He uses the word dies vital nos for. I gave you textual evidence. He uses the word dies vital nos for things of this world. Maybe God or the absolute principle has beingness or something else, but he uses the word reality for things of this world.
Thanks a lot. Ваш сосед был первым, потом вы.
Да, хорошо.
Нет, потом вы.
Хорошо, да, конечно.
Thank you very much, Frédéric. My question was terminological, but it would follow the discussion that just happened. Our textbooks teach us that the shift in the meaning of the word reality happened around the turn of 20th century, and it's often connected to Russell and so on. The medieval, the Platonic notion of realism changed into the naturalist meaning of what it is real, and there was a struggle for the word. Everyone wanted to have this realism on their side, and the naturalist position won. So, and Solovyov is probably beyond that point. He belongs to the Platonic strand of widely understood current of philosophy, and realism is what we have to use the Platonic sense, perhaps. And my question was about whether it's, I don't know, would it be terminologically correct to translate действительность as reality, not as actuality? There is, yeah.
Because in German maybe, but in English actuality means what now. It's temporal. It's a temporal term.
Sure.
So it
And
doesn't work.
I see. And существо as essence. Существо, существование, сущность, essence.
Yeah, maybe
and also to continue, you contrasted Solovyov to Aristotle, saying that Solovyov was more realist in the way that he awarded существование to things that Aristotle regarded as insubstantive. So is it существование and substantiality somehow synonymous, or are they different things perhaps? And we perhaps could go on with the list of terms. It's just a very different picture could emerge if we use this or that meaning. Thanks.
You want to react to this intervention?
know,
There are two more questions, so you can also we can take two more questions and then you have the last word.
Yeah, these are good points.
Okay,
Right,
then
I'll take it.
you are next, and then Edward again.
Да, спасибо. У меня не вопрос, у меня скорее реплика. Вот можно включить слайд, где было про камень? Ну, во-первых, я согласен с тем, что на основании того, что Соловьев, безусловно, признавал действительность, реальность внешнего мира, называть его не идеалистом, это, может быть, не очень осторожно, потому что в таком случае к идеалистической философии мы, наверное, мало вообще что можем отнести в истории человеческой мысли. Но сказать я хотел на самом деле о другом. Очень много было вот о той цитате из «Оправдания добра» про камень, где Соловьев действительно подчеркивает и красиво, метафорично реальность внешнего мира. Но ведь здесь еще важно очень учитывать контекст. Из этой цитаты была выпущена очень важная фраза о том, что камень – это действительно воплощение бытия, и как таковое он не показывает ни малейшей склонности к переходу в свое противоположное, что-то такое. Я могу немного переврать, и этот момент, он же полемический по отношению к гегелевской диалектике, о чем вот мы как раз тему затрагивали недавно, и в каком-то смысле это даже у критика самого себя, что ли, более раннего момента, поэтому вот этот контекст, мне кажется, он здесь важен.
Edward?
Замечание в отношении к тому, что вы сказали. Может, вы знаете, что вот это был проект, сколько, 20 лет тому назад уже, может больше, во Франции Барбара Кассан издала один или много томов, не знаю, название «Les Intraduisibles».
Один большой том.
И один большой, окей, в конце концов. И один из глав этого тома, это был вот это вокабуляр, это дискурс, существование и так дальше. Вот сидели так, как это переводить. У этого русского философа как бы мешалось. Вот. Трудно.
Окей, Фредерик, последнее слово вам. If you want, you can react to all questions or just pick something out or a final statement.
No, I'm good, thanks. I'm good.
Okay. Тогда спасибо большое.